Imagine entering a massive Roman arena. Tens of thousands of spectators roar from the stone stands. Two gladiators step onto the sand. The crowd erupts. Men are betting fortunes, families are screaming. The atmosphere is electric, and sitting among the elite is Julius Caesar. But according to ancient accounts, Caesar often wasn't watching at all. While thousands of people were emotionally invested in the race unfolding before them, Caesar would read letters, dictate correspondence, or focus on political matters. The crowd loved the spectacle. Caesar loved what happened after the spectacle. And strangely, modern psychology suggests there may be a reason why some people think more like Caesar than the crowd. Why do some people become completely absorbed by sports, while others feel almost nothing at all? The answer goes much deeper than personal preference. But here's where things get interesting, because Caesar wasn't unique. Throughout history, there have always been people who looked at the same spectacle everyone else was obsessed with, and simply didn't feel the pull. Maybe you've experienced this yourself. A room full of people is screaming at a television, and you're sitting there wondering why complete strangers are having an emotional reaction to something that has absolutely no effect on their lives. You've experienced exactly what Caesar felt. You aren't antisocial or boring. Your brain is simply wired on a different psychological frequency. Today we're diving into the hidden neuroscience and evolutionary psychology of the non-sports fan. For most Romans, a chariot race was a perfect psychological reward machine. Competition, uncertainty, tribal loyalty, victory, defeat, everything the human brain loves. Modern neuroscience shows that unpredictable outcomes activate powerful reward systems in the brain. Sports fans experience anticipation, tension, and emotional release. But not everyone experiences those rewards equally, and Caesar may have been one of those people. Mostly because, while the roaring crowd was captivated by the spectacle, Caesar sat preoccupied by affairs of state, silently plotting his next territorial conquest and his ultimate ascent to absolute power. And strangely, this may have created another problem for Caesar. The more he stood apart from the crowd, the easier it became for others to see him as different. History is full of examples like this, which leads us to the second consequence of not caring about sports. And no, it's not that the people around you dislike you. It's something far more subtle. When millions of people rally behind the same team, celebrate the same victory, and suffer the same defeat, they create a shared identity, a tribe. And whether we realize it or not, people naturally trust those who share their interests, values, and identities. And they often become suspicious of those who don't. People who don't follow sports often find themselves standing just outside that circle. Not because they're rejected, but because they're simply not participating in the same emotional experience. In many ways, Caesar occupied a similar position. He understood the crowd perfectly, yet he wasn't emotionally invested in the things that captivated them. And that difference reveals one of the most powerful forces in human psychology, the one that changes everything: social identity. And this leads to perhaps the strangest consequence of not needing group validation. In 75 BC, Julius Caesar was captured by pirates, the kind who enslaved people, tortured prisoners, and controlled entire sections of the sea. When they captured Caesar, they demanded a ransom of 20 talents of silver. Imagine yourself in that situation. Most people would immediately begin reading the room, trying to fit in, trying not to upset the group, trying to survive. But Caesar did something bizarre. He laughed, then he told the pirates they had made a mistake. 20 talents was too low. He informed them that he was worth 50, and somehow the pirates agreed. Think about how strange this is. The pirates had the weapons, the pirates had the power, the pirates made the rules. Yet Caesar behaved as if none of that mattered. Why? Because psychologically, he wasn't taking his cues from the people around him. His sense of value wasn't coming from the group. It was coming from somewhere internal. And modern psychology suggests the people who are less driven by tribal belonging often display a similar pattern. They are less likely to adjust their beliefs simply because everyone around them believes something different, including when it comes to sports. For 38 days, Caesar lived among the pirates, but he never acted like their prisoner. He ordered them to be quiet when he wanted to sleep. He forced them to listen to his speeches. When they failed to appreciate his writing, he openly mocked them. And during meals, he repeatedly told them something chilling. "When I am released, I will come back and crucify every one of you." The pirates laughed. All together in their group, they thought it was a joke. Because most people make threats when they are trying to impress a group, Caesar wasn't trying to impress anyone. He actually meant that shit. Whether surrounded by cheering Romans, political rivals, or armed pirates, his attention remained fixed on his own objectives. And that reveals another reason some people never become invested in sports. Their brains are often focused less on collective experiences and more on personal missions. But there is another reason some people never become passionate about sports, and it has nothing to do with intelligence or independence. It begins much earlier. Psychologists have long known that many of our strongest interests are formed when we're young. The games we play, the conversations we hear, the things our families celebrate. For many people, sports become emotionally meaningful long before they fully understand the rules, but imagine growing up without that connection. When Caesar was just a boy, his father died unexpectedly. He was only 16 years old. The person who shaped him most wasn't a general or a politician. It was his mother, Aurelia. Ancient historians described her as exceptionally intelligent, disciplined, and respected. While many Roman boys were taught to follow the expectations of those around them, Aurelia pushed Caesar toward something different. She gave him access to some of the finest teachers in Rome. She immersed him in rhetoric, philosophy, history, and strategy. But perhaps most importantly, she instilled a powerful belief. Your value does not come from the crowd, it comes from what you become. And soon after, a brutal civil war had torn Rome apart. A dictator so ruthless that thousands of political enemies were executed came into power, and nobody said no to him. Yet one teenager did. So because Caesar's family was connected to the dictator, Sulla's enemies, the dictator gave him an ultimatum. Divorce your wife, prove your loyalty, or face the consequences. Most people would have complied instantly, but Caesar refused, not because he had power nor protection. In fact, Sulla stripped him of his inheritance, removed his religious office, and forced him into hiding. Night after night, Caesar moved from place to place, avoiding capture while suffering from illness and living as a fugitive, bribing the soldiers of the king. And still he refused. Eventually, influential Romans convinced Sulla to spare the young man, but before doing so, he warned that within this Caesar there are many Mariuses. In other words, this one is dangerous, not because he was physically strong, not because he had many followers, but because he could not be controlled the way most people could. Sulla understood something that many leaders throughout history would eventually discover. People who are not dependent on group approval think differently. They are harder to pressure, harder to predict, and often harder to stop. Which brings us back to sports. Most people experience competition through a tribe. Our team wins, our team loses, our team succeeds, our team fails. But some people never develop that we, attachment. Their attention naturally moves elsewhere, toward personal goals, private interests, long-term missions, and whether that person becomes a scientist, an artist, an entrepreneur, or a Roman statesman, the psychology underneath may be surprisingly similar.